So if you have to drop off, that's fine. We'll shoot this out to you so that you can pick up where you left off. Also, if you have a question, there's a chat function on the bottom toolbar. Please use that. We have a bunch of folks on here, so I didn't want to unmute everyone, and that always creates a little bit of chaos. So feel free to ask a question at any time. I'll always try and catch it as it comes across. But let's get things going. This is one of the webinars I've really been excited to present to everyone. One of the reasons is guaranteed income is probably the topic I get asked the most questions about. Interestingly, as I was just finishing up the presentation and putting on some final touches last night, I mean, we're talking 9 o'clock at night, I had 2 people contact me about their clients looking for guaranteed income. I mean, is that hot a topic? So, very timely. What we want to talk about today is guaranteed lifetime income. There are several different ways that we can help you attack that for your clients. And what we should start with here is just a history of why. Why is it so popular right now? And one of the reasons it's so popular right now is because everyone used to have some form of guaranteed lifetime income in the form of a private pension. Those are starting to go away. If you see here, I mean, in '79, there were 38% of folks had a private pension. That is basically less than half of that now. So it was something a lot of people got used to having, the security, not so much these days. And even if you look at the folks who have private pensions, most of them, it's half or more of their total income at this point. So you have a lot of people who got comfortable with those, and you see people who've seen them be comfortable with those. So what we want to try to do is say, you know, what can we do for people that want those kinds of things that really don't have the private pension of the old days? What do they have now? Well, these days most people have some kind of defined contribution plan. Those are great, but at the end there's no real guaranteed income components to it. You tend to be on your own. And when you're on your own for something like that, there are certain risks. The 2 risks that we primarily see are financial risks. You're at the whims of market flows and changes in the environment, and when you see that kind of volatility, that's kind of the opposite of what a guarantee is. And that's really not what we're looking for. The other risks that you see out there are longevity. And I'm going to steal a great quote here from Moshe Milevsky. Human longevity is random and unpredictable, and when you combine that with financial volatility, that first component we talked about, you have a recipe for disaster. As he says, retirement income without guarantees are subject to lifetime ruin probability, which happens when you are alive but your portfolio is dead. So we definitely want to avoid that. By this point, you're probably saying, Mike, this is one of the most depressing webinars I've ever heard. What can we do? Well, there's a lot of things we can do. And it really depends on when somebody is looking for guaranteed lifetime income. We can do it now, we can do it later, we can do something where they don't even know when they need it, but they know they need it because they see how important it is. So I'm going to take you through a few examples here of those different time periods and even throw in a little bit of a couple sales ideas, some tips, some tricks, and things like that as we move down the road. The first thing I want to talk about is SPIA, and you're probably going to say, Mike, everyone knows what an immediate annuity is, but this kind of sets up some things down the road with what we're going to look at. If somebody wants income right away, the simplest way to do it is still an immediate annuity. So what I'm going to do for most of the presentation here as we look at these different forms of guaranteed income is I'm going to take a female age 65. She's going to carve out $500,000 of her non-qualified money. For this first illustration, we're going to say, hey, she needs income right away. What does that look like? So I've just taken one of the companies we work with, and you can see here, if she carves that out and moves it into an immediate annuity, she gets kicked out around $2,000 a month, guaranteed for life, which is the key. That doesn't go away. I mean, it is a constant. The one that I particularly want to look at here is the installment refund option. The reason is Installment refund is probably the option that we see the most of when we're quoting, and it's going to kind of come back to us in the later part of the presentation where it's going to be important to us. Installment refund basically means a guaranteed return of our initial investment of $500,000. What they'll do is they'll take that $2,071 and they'll make sure that that amount is at least cumulatively paid out to, if not our annuitant, to her beneficiary. So in other words, if she dies prior to getting a cumulative $500,000 in payments, a beneficiary will get the remaining payments. They'll keep getting paid until it totals $500,000. So it's basically like a return of premium. There's also a cash refund option, which means if she would pass away before the $500,000 cumulative amount is paid out, they would pay it as a lump sum. That's why that one's a little more expensive. But for what we're talking about today, let's kind of settle in on installment refund option. I want you to remember this number, $2,071 a month. That is the benefit she'll receive here. Another important thing that we'll talk about and that will come into play here down the road is the exclusion ratio. Exclusion ratio means portions of her payment are taxable and non-taxable. So for each payment that she gets of $2,071, 82% is a return of her $500,000, and then there's a taxable amount on top of that. That helps spread out the taxes here. So that'll come into play down the road when we look at some other payout options. But that's one of the important parts of a SPIA, is the exclusion ratio, especially when you're talking about non-qualified funds. This is still the best way to get immediate income. It's old-fashioned, it's plain vanilla, but it's a steady Eddie, and folks really like it once they get it. The next thing I'd like to talk about is a little secret weapon that you can use. We're going to take a little exit from the guaranteed income approach, and this is something we use when we're using an immediate annuity to fund life insurance or a linked benefit product. So keep this in mind if you use that technique. Say someone has an old annuity or an old life insurance policy, and they want to 10-pay fund a life policy or a long-term care plan even. Usually you would just buy what's here, a 10-year period certain immediate annuity, $4,333. That would pay for 10 years and cease. What we can do with one of our companies is do something called temporary life. Temporary life is a little bit of a higher payment. What that'll do is that'll pay for 10 years, but if you die prior to the 10-year period, it will cease payments. Now that sounds a little funny, but that doesn't really matter if you're using this to fund a life product or using it to fund a long-term care, because essentially if you die at that point, you don't need that product anymore anyway, or your death benefit's been paid out. So just keep this arrow in your quiver if you're in a competitive situation. This is something we can use to give you an edge. I'm not going to go through this whole thing, but this is a real slick concept from a legacy planning perspective that you can use with an immediate annuity. And another thing that this illustrates is the power of compound interest. What this plan really is it's an individual who buys a $500,000 SPIA, and what they do is they put their great-grandchild on as a joint annuitant. That's something neat that you can do. What happens throughout time is initially you receive an annual payment on your $500,000 of $2,817. Not remarkable right away, but Grandpa really doesn't need the income. What he wants to do is set up a legacy for his family. Basically, as time goes on, Grandpa will pass away. As he passes away, there's still an annuitant tied to the policy that's alive, so you need to name a new owner. He'll name Grandma owner. The policy continues. And keep in mind we have a 5% compound inflation option here. So as time goes on, the payment amount increases annually. Eventually, you'll see Grandma dies. The son takes over. The son will pass away, and the child's mother takes over. So I don't want to go through the whole thing, but you can see here, over time, this is a really effective way to leave a lasting gift for your family using an immediate annuity and guaranteed income. Over time, if you get to age, if the great-grandchild eventually gets to age 93, you can see that the annual payment has grown to $216,575. That's just incredible power of guaranteed compound interest that you can see with a product like this. Total payments cumulatively $4.4 million, almost $4.5 million. So it's a really neat, off-the-radar way to provide a legacy for a family. So we've talked about what we can do with some immediate annuities. What if I don't need income now, but I definitely want income down the road, and I know exactly when I want it down the road? In those situations, for guaranteed income later, we use what's called longevity insurance, also called a deferred income annuity, and when they're qualified, we call them a QLAC, and I've had several discussions on that, and I won't go down that track today. But basically what these are immediate annuities that pay out starting more than 1 year into the future. It's a pretty simple concept. There's not a lot of moving parts, so it's like an immediate annuity. Basically, the first payment is deferred a long period down the road. So let's look at an example. We had a female age 65. We're going to take her same $500,000. At this point, she's dead set in knowing that she needs income at age 75. So what we'll do is we'll set up the contract to work that way. Now, here's an example of one of the A-plus carriers that we use for these types of situations. Now, remember in our first immediate annuity example, an installment refund payment for life kicked off about $2,000 a month. You can see here with the deferral, her income is going to be more than double. So if you use a contract like this, where you want the income to start down the road, you definitely get some leveraging for your payments. So we'll have a much higher payment amount. We still have the guarantee attached to the policy so that if something happens to her before the cumulative total's paid out, the payments will continue to a beneficiary. Another important thing here is it does have a return of premium at death, so that say something crazy does happen before age 65, then the premium will be returned to the insured, or to a beneficiary, I'm sorry. This is a nice, simple way to do it. There's not a lot of moving parts. If somebody's looking for a plain vanilla solution to get future income, this is usually the go-to. Let's look at something a little more complex. Now, there are people out there who really appreciate guaranteed income, and they understand its importance. But one of the things they're uncertain about is when they actually want it to begin. For those people out there, we can look at income riders, or GLBs, Guaranteed Lifetime Benefit Riders. What these are there are riders attached usually to indexed annuities, but I do have some fixed annuity options that work as well. And what it does is it creates a separate pool that grows that can be drawn down for lifetime income. I'll give you some examples here. We'll use our same female age 65 for $500,000. What we'll do is we'll want to look at how do these work. I said it's a separate pool of money that grows apart from their accumulation value, and I'll show you a comparison in a minute. The key components to a GLB are the income base. That's the big pot of income money. How does it get to be a big pot? Something called a roll-up. A roll-up is a fixed percentage of growth that gets credited to that income base each year. This can be confusing. I have a lot of people who walk in the door and say, Mike, I have someone getting 7% guaranteed on their annuity. Can we beat that? Usually what they're talking about is the GLB. Roll-ups can be around 6.5%, 7%. That's only to be used for the income base. That's not a pure interest rate credited to the policy. That's credited to them at surrender, death. They can make withdrawals. Only to be used for income. So this policy, the income base grows based on the roll-up. When it comes to be time for income, how do they determine it? They use an income factor, and those vary among different contracts, but they're usually set at policy issue. Income factors are a percentage of the income base based on age. It usually increases over time. So the longer you wait, the older you're getting, your income factor is increasing. Usually it's about 5%. It'll swing as low as 4, and it can swing as high as 6. But obviously, the longer you let the policy go, it's more of a benefit to you. The last thing I want to talk about that most people don't talk about is a rider charge. All of this stuff up here to get the income rider on these policies isn't free. So you definitely don't want one unless you're going to use it, because there are charges in these policies, sometimes, usually about 1%, but they can be more, and they can even vary every year, that will eat into the accumulation value of a product. I'll show you what I mean here in a second. So here's an example. What we have here, I want you to look at the left side first. The left side is showing our roll-up and our guaranteed income base grow. So we put in $500,000. You can see here we have a 10-year period. The income base has grown up to $1 million. And you can see in this particular product, our roll-up is 7.2% guaranteed fixed. So that goes up steady over time. Say she decides to take income at age 75. She started this when she was 65. The factor at age 75 is 6%. So you could see 6% of the million is $60,000 a year that she could draw out of the contract, guaranteed for life. Now the other side of the equation is the actual annuity value. How does that function? That functions as a normal annuity would. And in this situation, we have an underlying indexed annuity product. This will grow as a normal indexed annuity. You can see here, this contract has a 5% cap. So for the example, they've taken some time periods, and we've credited 5% to the contract in some years 0. What this is, now you have to pay attention here, because it's not necessarily it's the 5%. It's 5% minus the 1% charge for the rider over here. So the actual annuity values are a little bit less than our 5% growth every year. But you do need to keep in mind that this over here, the annuity values, annuity death benefits, are separate from our income base. If they would die in the first 10 years of the contract, they would get this actual account value. If they would need to surrender the contract, they would get this contract value on the right side. If they need to tap into it, but not necessarily turn on the income rider, maybe they want a penalty-free 10% one time, we would use the annuity value on this right side. So there are some limitations if you want flexibility to take money out willy-nilly, or if you're unsure if you're going to use the income rider. I would always say if you're going to use the income rider, that's fine. Just make sure you're going to use it, because you don't want your growth to be deteriorated by the charges. Just make sure it's something you want when you buy the plan. It is very flexible. You can see all of these income numbers. These are guaranteed. So 5 years down the road, she wants to turn it on. She knows she's getting $38,931 a year. It's very nice. It's very flexible. But a great plan for somebody who appreciates guaranteed income for a portion of their investments, just doesn't know when they want to pull the trigger. I want to touch on one thing that's been kind of important lately. We've just had some luck with it. Here's one more income idea that you can use using inherited annuities. It seems like we've had a run here of folks who die with annuities, and they seem like they're acting like they're stuck, and they just have to take that lump sum death benefit. That doesn't work for a lot of reasons, because it's a kind of a bad tax hit, especially on a contract that has a low cost basis and a lot of gain on top. So one of the things that we've been doing lately is we have a carrier that will actually allow a beneficiary a non-qualified stretch option. What that does is it allows them to set up a new contract with that death benefit. They do have to make withdrawals akin to an RMD. Now, the great thing about that is that when you do the non-qualified stretch, we do get the benefit of the exclusion ratio like we did with the immediate annuity in the beginning. So portions of the payments are non-taxable, portions are taxable. So we spread out that tax liability for them. So this is another really great way that we can create some supplemental income for someone who's inherited an annuity. Just one last thing real quick. We still do have qualified stretch IRAs. There's a little bit more restrictions on it, not a ton, but based on some rules that have come out in 2020, there are just some differences with beneficiaries, and we can do. But the policies are still available, and we do a little bit of these too. So if you run into a situation where someone has passed away and the beneficiaries don't quite want to get hit with all those taxes at once, we can create income for them over a period of time to stretch out that tax liability. And that's kind of where I'm going to sew things up for today. I hope that was helpful for you. I hope you caught some useful little tricks and tips. If anyone has any questions, you can hit me up on the chat. I'll give you a minute or two to do that. But obviously, if you have any questions, feel free to call us here at the Broker Source. My contact info is there. And if you think of anything down the road, just feel free to reach out to me or anybody else, or if you think of something this afternoon, which tends to happen with me, just always feel free to give me a call. But I hope this was helpful to you. Thanks for joining today. I hope you were able to get some info out of it. And hang on, I may have a question here. Let's see. Let me explain. We have a question about the temporary life concept. So just to go over this again, temporary life is something we use to fund either a 10-pay policy, a life policy, or a long-term care plan. It's basically, let me go back to it actually, that might be helpful. So, usually when people are using an immediate annuity to fund a life policy or a long-term care plan, they just say, let's sweep it into a 10-pay SPIA, have the 10-pay SPIA kick off payments, and we'll just redirect those payments over into the life product. They're using this first option, 10 years period certain. That would kick off $4,333 a month. Now, an option that we have is called temporary life. Temporary life is the same 10-year period that it'll pay. However, if you would die prior to 10 years, the payments would stop. Whereas with the 10-year period certain, say you died at year 6, there would be 4 more years of payments, which is great to a beneficiary. But if you're using it to fund a life policy, in year 6, the life death benefit's going to pay out, and those last payments, the 4 more years of payments, they're kind of extraneous. So why don't we use those to get a little bit more leveraging and create a higher paying 10-year certain period with the temporary life. So essentially, we're just juicing up our period certain a little bit to get a little bit more leveraging to kick more premium over to fund the short pay life policy or the short pay long-term care. I hope that explains it. If it didn't, just give me a shout and I can go through it again. But if anybody else has any questions, speak now. Like I said, if anything pops up, we'll be happy to help. And I hope this was helpful for you. And please give me a call if you have any questions. Thanks. Have a great day.